Hello, and welcome back to The Land, a podcast about basketball in the Borderland. I'm your host, Javier Cortez, and this is episode number 2. So, in today's episode, we're talking about more prospects, but this time, the top prospects in girls' high school basketball in the Borderland area. Now, if you tuned into episode 1, that was all about the top prospects on the boys' side. In total, talked about 40 players, broke them down into 6 tiers, and then talked about the top 5 players from tier 1 in depth. Now, another thing I mentioned on that episode is how the coverage will look different between boys and girls for this year, simply because this is my first year covering girls high school basketball. So, uh, no tiers, no rankings, none of that necessarily for this episode, but I'm still going to talk about a lot of prospects on the girls' side, and then I'm going to mention some in-depth, talk specifically about them. But all in all, I think we have a pretty quality episode here today. That being said, before we get going on that, I do want to spend just a little bit of time giving some brief observations, thoughts, opinions from some of the events that I've covered over the past 2 weeks, but also just some of the conversations I've had over the last summer months as we head into fall, or as we're in fall now. So the first thing I really want to mention, and just to give a big shout out to, is to Bob Jones and everybody that helped put on the Jamboree Showcase. So the people behind the scenes getting stuff done, the student athletes that were helping out at these events. I just can't say enough about how good and important I think events like these are. For those who don't know, the Jamboree Showcase is in its second year, and it's just a host to a lot of local talent in the Borderland region and close areas for a 2-day event over the weekend, to just have some good, healthy competition, kind of like a preseason buffer before we get this 2024-25 season started. The girls' showcase was held on September 14th through the 15th at Idea Edgemere in East El Paso, and the boys' event was hosted at Del Valle High School on September 21st through the 22nd, also in East El Paso. And again, I just really think these are the type of events that, as a basketball community, but also more broadly as a sporting community, should be supported and need to be supported, because it's such a great consolidation of local talent. And selfishly for me, for the work that I'm trying to do, the coverage that I'm trying to provide, it was just so helpful, because especially on the girls' side, because I got to see so much of our local talent here in a matter of 2 days. I would say roughly 90 to 95% of the top girls players were in attendance for the showcase, minus a few exceptions, but basically everybody was there. And on the boys' side, basically the same thing, in addition to some really talented prospects coming from Hobbs, New Mexico, Arizona, Alamogordo. So I think both events were just really great at kind of accomplishing that foundational goal of having a really solid competitive 2-day event. So again, these are the events that really need to be supported, and I think hopefully they get supported at 3 levels going forward, consistently on both sides. One, more fan support, more butts in the seat. That's always awesome, whether that's more parents or friends and family members of the players, or just general sports fans or basketball fans who are interested in seeing good quality high school basketball. I think that's excellent. More media coverage too. The more media something gets, the more people are going to come. So those things working hand in hand. And then also just better support from our public administrators to lend their facilities out so that these athletes can play on the best possible stages. Like I said, the girls' showcase was hosted at Idea Edgemere in East El Paso. And it's no shade to anybody at Idea or that facility that was being used, but I think a bigger stage, and that was the intention of the showcase runners, was to play somewhere else or other venues, but the finances, the money, the dollars and cents got in the way of that, and I totally understand that, because it costs money to turn the lights on at these facilities, and I'm not ignorant to how those things go and the red tape of all that, but I really believe that our public schools, which are funded with public taxpayer dollars, really should be open and available for things like this. Because again, these showcase runners, people like Bob Jones, they're not trying to take money out of our community. They're not trying to rake in the dollars hand and fist. They're doing this for the kids. So if we keep the main thing, and everybody in this area comes together on these things, it's only going to benefit the kids. And that's who it's all about. So um, I just want to see both showcases on the boys and girls side played on equal stages and the best possible stages at the best possible facilities that this area has. But all that being said, I think both events, showcases, were highly successful because the most important people were there. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about college coaches were there, recruiters at the next level, trainers, program leaders, the type of people that are either A, going to help student athletes get prepared for the next level, or B, people who are going to give these student athletes an opportunity to play at the next level. So, in my mind, it makes it a total success because the most important people were there. And as a fly on the wall, I was just really impressed by just the quality of it. And so hopefully going forward, it just gets supported, at all levels with fan support, media coverage, school administrators, people helping out the event organizers. And I think it will, because this is still very early on, but the vision that the people at the Jamboree have, it's very obvious to see. Now I think it's just calling on other people to do their small part, and just make it easier for these events to run a lot more smoothly and as best as they can. But again, shout out to Bob Jones and everybody who put that on, because I know they're tired after 2 weeks. I know they were grinding really hard putting this together, and they did an excellent job. Okay, one more thing before we start talking prospects on the girls' side. This episode really would not be possible if it wasn't for the dozen or so conversations that I've had with really smart, intelligent people who are really clued in on the girls' basketball scene here. I talked to coaches, trainers, some players, just people who really know the scene. They're really knowledgeable. I like to think that the opinions that I'm going to express on this episode are mine and mine alone. However, I also like to think that they're well informed opinions by the conversations that I've had with so many different people. So I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to specifically cite sources, not because people don't want their names out on this podcast or anything like that, but the way I like to do my work, the way I like to go about getting information, I like to go on background with people instead of always having to be on record. So, to journalism terms, what does that really mean? On record means that anything that somebody says, you're going to use print kind of verbatim, versus on background. I'm still going to take in what they're telling me. I'm still going to add that into my coverage, into my reporting, but I'm not going to directly quote somebody or put somebody's name to something. So the dozen or so people that I talk to, I'm using and combining all those opinions together. So sometimes throughout this episode, you're going to hear me say, well, I heard this about this player. And when you hear me say that, I'm referring to multiple people, or in journalism, we have the rule of three to verify information or sources, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I go about things with my coverage too. So if one source tells me player X does this really well, then I'm going to go talk to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, as many different sources as I can to see, well, do they see that? Do they see that? Does this person see that? So when I say things like that, I heard that this player does this, I heard that this player does that, it's not based on one opinion. It's based on an amalgamation of well-informed voices and my own observations too, and watching these players, whether it's at the Jamboree or on tape or a little bit from last year or in my own research. So that's more or less what my homework looks like for an episode like this. So with that, this episode is really split into two parts. Part one, I'm going to talk about a grouping of players and various honorable mention kind of superlatives. And then I'm going to break down a specific number of prospects in detail. I'll get to why I get to that number and how I came to that certain number of prospects to break down in detail. But for now, I'm going to focus on the honorable mentions. And a really important thing that I want people to remember with these players in this honorable mention category, please do not get confused that because I'm not talking about them in depth, like I will with the final few prospects that I talk about in depth, that they're not part of an elite group of players. Every player I mentioned in this episode is part of a elite group of players. What I really think is interesting and really fun and exciting about girls basketball right now here in the Borderland is that the talent dispersion is even across the board. You have talented players in every class, position, skill set, ability. Whereas on the boys' side, a lot of the major talent resides in the junior and senior classes and mainly at the guard positions, but not in girls basketball. It's, again, very evenly dispersed. So, do not get it confused if a player's name is mentioned in honorable mention. Some of the best players in the Borderland are mentioned in the honorable mention section. So enough pre-talk. Let's get to the fun part. Let's start talking players. Okay, first group of honorable mentions, the Americas guards. So we have Mary Brooks, a 2026 shooting guard at 5'4", Jaden Herrera, a 2026 guard at 5'2", and Kaylin Medrano, a 2026 guard at 5'1". Now, there's another Americas guard that I'm going to mention later in this episode, but I want to talk about these three first, mainly because they all individually stand out, but together really form to make one of the more formidable backcourt trios that the area has to offer. And you might think, well, a backcourt trio, surely you can't play all three of these players at the same time. And in America's case, they absolutely can, and they do it highly effectively. What's really special about the grouping of these three girls is that when they're playing at their best, they're all completely interchangeable. They can all pick up in areas where the other one is on the ball, off the ball, in transition, trailing a play. They can all just do it all, really. And that's a function of the fact that they've all three played together for the most part throughout their high school career, but also within the AAU scene. And that shows because the chemistry and the synergy with these three is really remarkable. Mary Brooks individually, I have her categorized as a shooting guard. Again, I can place her as a guard too. I have her in that distinction because she's a little bit taller, and I think her best skills reside in kind of off ball catch and shoot, stand still, floor spacing. She's a really, really solid shooter, and she gets a lot of good looks within America's offense. So I kind of look at Brooks as the off ball gunner, somebody in the half court who can really beat you if you're rotating too late or if you're not closing out hard, not the type of player you can leave open. Herrera and Medrano, similar height, and they're both really, really good lead attack defenders, point of attack defenders who you can place, at the top of a zone or have them guard an opponent, 94 feet. They're that type of player. Herrera herself is a really good playmaker with the ball in her hands, and Medrano is one of the best on-ball defenders in the Borderland. And again, that has been kind of verified and acknowledged through a lot of different conversations that I've had, not only with coaches, but players alike. She's really, really hard to shake off if she's on you. She kind of is just really good at sticking to you. Even if you might cross her over, she's kind of like right back on you from everything that I've been told and from what I saw at the Jamboree Showcase too. But again, they're all so interchangeable. So, you can look at Brooks as the as the catch and shoot two guard, and Herrera is a really good playmaker with the ball in her hands, and Monterano as the point of attack defender. But they can all really do that, and they can all play on ball, off ball, be the point of attack defender, catch and shoot, playmaking transition. That's the beauty of this team and their chemistry. So, they just are a really fun trio to watch. So those are the America's guards, Mary Brooks, Jaden Herrera, and Kaylin Medrano. Next honorable mentions, we have the Riverside Big Three of AJ Alvarado, a 2025 wing at 6 feet, Jazlene Castro, a 2025 guard at 5'9", and Yasmin Rios at a 2025 wing at 5'8". So positionally, these girls were kind of hard to categorize, depending on where you look or who you ask. You'll kind of get different answers. Are they guards? Are they forwards? Or some of them, centers? I I kind of look at all three as wings, kind of big, oversized wings, especially Alvarado at 6 feet tall in girls basketball in this area. When you're close to 6 feet tall, you're probably going to play as a power forward or as a five, which for Riverside she does. But I think with her game style and her skill set, she makes a lot of sense as a wing. Same with Yasmin Rios. And then Castro, I have categorized as a guard, but 5'9", 5'10"-ish. Really good height for the position. Can play at the three, can play at the two, but I think has more guard skills maybe than Alvarado and Rios. But positions aside, it makes for a pretty interesting and formidable trio at the 2-4A level. Riverside's going to be in pole position, not to get into team previews too much, but these three, all seniors coming back together, I think they complement each other decently well. And again, really good height for their positions too. So, just going back and looking at the players for Americas and their height for their positions, and then looking at a team like Riverside, these girls have a lot of height, a lot of length, and it's going to pay dividends down in 2-4A basketball. So that's the Riverside Big Three: AJ Alvarado, Jazlene Castro, and Yasmin Rios. Make sure to pay attention to Riverside this season. So next, honorable mentions, the prospects in the paint. This is designated for the bigs, the fours, the fives. So first we have Jazlene Hernandez from Montwood, a 2026 forward center at 6'1". Joy Hunt from Centennial, a 2025 forward at 5'11". Sienna McKines from Mayfield, a 2026 forward at 5'8". Elizabeth Needham from Alamogordo, a 2026 center forward at 6 feet. And Kyla Winfield from Franklin, another 2026 center forward at 6 feet as well. So, again, this is what I'm talking about with the girls' basketball. It's not that it's just about all the guards or juniors and seniors. You really see a wide array of talent at all kinds of positions. And these aren't the only bigs that I'm going to be talking about for this episode. Jazlene Hernandez, around 6 feet, 6'1", plays at center, but I think is comfortable out on the wing too. Has some versatility there. Is going to be a huge player for Monmouth this season. They're going to be much improved. I think they're going to challenge for the 6A title, and she has 2 more years to keep improving her game as well. Joy Hunt is widely recognized as one of the best interior prospects within the city of Las Cruces at 5'11". She can play at the center position as well. She'll have a big year for Centennial, no doubt about it. Sienna McKines, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, McKines, from Mayfield. A little bit undersized compared to the other girls on the list, but she's one of the leading rebounders in the city of Las Cruces coming back, and she's going to have a big year. Mayfield is arguably the best girls team within the Las Cruces area. Elizabeth Needham from Alamogordo. Now, this kid is, I would categorize her as a center. This year, she's going to line up at the power forward position because who Alamogordo has playing at center this year. Around 5'11", 6 feet tall, really good offensive rebounder, really good cleaning up in the paint, really hard to just keep off the boards, impactful player. She's going to have a phenomenal final 2 years at Alamogordo. And then lastly is Kyla Winfield, who I think is going to have a breakout junior year for Franklin. Again, another center forward, will play at the center position for Franklin this year, but has the athletic ability to guard out in space at around 6 feet tall. And her defensive upside is pretty incredible. Is she automatically the best defensive player in the Borderland? Uh, I might go with a few other players, but when you're talking about the top tier defensive players, if you're not mentioning Kyla Winfield, it ain't a good list. Her shot blocking ability, but more broadly speaking, her ability as a shot contester is really disruptive. Really, really disruptive. She can close a fair amount of distance in a very short amount of time. And I think she just fits in so well with the current Franklin squad and the guards that they have. So Kyla Winfield, I think, is she's going to be one of the best players in 6A basketball, not only for her position, but just in general with the team that she's on and the situation that she's in. So pay attention to Kyla Winfield. But all in all, those are the prospects in the paint. Jazlene Hernandez, Joy Hunt, Sienna McKines, Elizabeth Needham, and Kyla Winfield. Next honorable mentions the 2027 Big Four. So in the lead up to this episode, doing my homework, trying to talk to as many people, I heard a lot about the class of 2027 and how talented the sophomores, the rising sophomores are heading into this new season. And there were 4 sophomores that were identified in those conversations and then validated from what I saw at the Jamboree. So we have Mia Delgado from Pebble Hills, a 5'9 forward. Jade Martinez from Bel Air, a 5'2 point guard. Alyssa Morales from Burgess, a 5'6 guard. And Ebony Valdez from Eastlake, a 5'3 point guard. So, starting with Mia Delgado, do not get it twisted with her height or her position. This is a perimeter player, a perimeter scorer, or at the very least, somebody who is very comfortable taking and making shots from behind the 3-point arc and has pretty extended range for that position too. Still learning how to develop the inside game, so she's more of an outside in player as opposed to an inside out scorer, but very, very talented. Is going to take on a slightly bigger role for Pebble Hills this year. Pebble Hills has some of the best returning players, so I think she's going to be in a really, really good position to get a lot of good quality looks and easy buckets. So I think she's going to have a great sophomore year. Jade Martinez from Bel Air, one of those smaller guards, but tough as nails, hard to break down. I already think she's Bel Air's best player, personally speaking. And again, she's just going to have a lot of opportunity playing for that team to really show out and hopefully lead. But I just think she's a grinder. She's a tough kid and really solid on the ball too. So she's going to have a big year for Bel Air. Alyssa Morales from Burgess is, in 2 years, this might be the best prospect coming out of the Borderland area. She's that talented, good size for her age, for her position. She's a really good athlete. You just watch her play, and she stands out amongst other girls in terms of her speed, her strength. It's really all there. You know, she's going to have good senior leadership returning this year to kind of help her out a bit. And for her, it's just learning how to let the game come to her and all the things that come with that in a leadership position. But she's going to have a phenomenal sophomore year. And again, in 2 years, you're going to be hearing a lot more of her name. Absolutely. And then lastly is Ebony Valdez from Eastlake. Like Morales, I think will be one of the best players that this area has to offer. Just observing her over the weekend at the Jamboree, her balance, her short area quickness, her ability to navigate the floor without getting knocked down or falling to the ground, it really stood out. And when I found out she was a soccer player as well, it just made sense because if you think about that sport and the constant moving, the short area quickness, the quick change of direction, all of those things, they really transfer over to a sport like basketball. You don't really get a lot of soccer basketball combos within high school sports, but you can really see how being on the soccer field can translate, help, and benefit being a basketball prospect. So I think Valdez is uh, she will be probably the best player on Eastlake, or at least the most important player. And she has a big season ahead of her. But again, in a couple years, will be one of those candidates for best player in the area, in my opinion. So that's the 2027 Big Four: Mia Delgado, Jade Martinez, Alyssa Morales, and Evany Valdez. Okay, last honorable mentions: the Super Juniors and Seniors. So this is a big group, 8 girls in total on this grouping. I had a hard time really just how I wanted to categorize or organize these players, but ultimately I just couldn't move on after this segment or not talk about these players within this podcast episode. Again, there's so many talented, good high school basketball players on the girls' side. So I just have to give some of these players mention. So first we have Jasmine Blake from Chapin High School. She's a 2025 wing at 5'8". Itzel Caro from Eastwood, a 2025 wing, also at 5'8". Jocelyn Custard from Montwood, a 2026 prospect. She's a guard at 5'8". Mia Harrison, another Montwood player from the class of 2026, a 5'6" point guard. Jada Martin Lewis from Chapin, a 2026 prospect, a guard at 5'5". Olivia Morales from Eastwood, 2025 prospect at the point guard position, standing at 5'6". Jessica Roberts from Oregon Mountain, 2025 prospect, a guard at 5'7". And then Daisy Urenda from Chapin, a 2025 prospect at the point guard position, standing at 5'2". So to move through this list a little bit more efficiently, I'm going to talk about all the players from the same teams. So I'm going to go a little bit of reverse order here. Starting with Jessica Roberts from Oregon Mountain. She played for West Texas Prep at the Jamboree a couple weeks ago. West Texas Prep was essentially a makeshift team of talent from all around the region that got grouped together because their respective teams couldn't make it. And I was really impressed. Somebody who was not on my radar, 5'6", 5'7", really long and rangy for the position, smooth on the ball, smooth off the ball, nice jump shot, really interchangeable at that position. And so if she can suit up for Oregon Mountain this year, I think she's going to be really, really important to the Knights. Next, the Chapin players. So Daisy Urenda, Jaden Martin Lewis, and Jasmine Blake. Chapin's going to win a lot more games this year. It's starting with Jasmine Blake, who's arguably or probably their best player at 5'8", really strong, athletic kid who's starting to come into her own. The basketball skills are starting to develop. But I think Blake is going to be helped out mightily this year by having people like Jada Martin Lewis and Daisy Urenda to help her in the backcourt, help her with some of those guard responsibilities, because I think Blake is probably in the best position playing out on the wing, maybe more as a 2 or as a 3. And then you have somebody like a Jada Martin Lewis, a transfer from Andrews coming in, really good on the ball, a strong player. If you sag off her, if you don't pay attention to her, she's going to make you pay. Same with Daisy Urenda, who was on the Chapin JV squad, I believe, last season. Would have been on the varsity squad, but she was a transfer from Pebble Hill, so she got 365. Again, strong ball handler, quick with the ball, quick when she has the ball in her hands. So I think that combination of players, even if you don't see all three necessarily start or always on the floor at the same time, I think are really going to help lift this Chapin squad that it has a fair amount of depth too. So only 3 Chapin players are getting mentioned on this episode, but they got some other girls like Samantha Wise, who I think is going to be important for them coming back. But those 3 together, I think, are going to be one of the more formidable trios or backcourts or wing combinations that 5A basketball has to offer. After that, Olivia Morales and Itzel Caro from Eastwood. Eastwood is a phenomenal program that is absolutely stacked with talent, and these 2 seniors are as good as it gets for the area. Olivia Morales is one of the more solid point guards. She's a cross-country athlete too, well-conditioned, always in good shape, but just steady, fits into their offense very well, and she's just going to have a huge, important role for the Troopers this year. And Itzel Caro is, again, this is why I talked about at the top of the episode, do not get it confused that just because they're in the honorable mention section that they're not elite prospects. Itzel Caro, anybody or everybody in the Borderland would love to have a kid like Itzel Cotto. Leadership, gamer, checks all the boxes. I was so impressed watching her at the Jamboree. It's one of the most impressive prospects that I saw, and just a great team leader, and just, brings her teammates together on and off the floor. When she talks, they listen, but just a connector on the court too. So Morales and Cotto are going to be excellent and really, really important for Eastwood going forward. And then last two, Jazlene Custard and Mia Hairston. Those two combined to make one of the best backcourts in the Borderland. Jazlene Custard is a very confident player. There's not a shot she won't take out on the perimeter or driving to the hoop. Hustles hard, puts her body on the line. Really just kind of everything that you would want from a player, and really coming into her own. Still has 2 more years to keep growing and developing. Mia Hairston, very smooth point guard. A lot of people, brought her name up when talking about the elite players in this area. She's really thought of highly amongst her peers. And again, like Custard, a 2026 prospect. So those two have 2 more seasons to play with each other. So you could already say they're one of the top backcourts, and they're going to continue to be for the next 2 years. So those are the Super Juniors: Jasmine Blake, Itzel Cotto, Jazlene Custard, Mia Hairston, Jada Martin-Lewis, Olivia Morales, Jessica Roberts, and Daisy Urenda. Okay, so before we switch gears, I want to talk about how I came to this final grouping of players and why I'm going to talk about these players in depth. I want to talk about how I got to the process of choosing which prospects to discuss in depth and how I got to that number. There are 10 more prospects that I'm going to mention on this episode. How did I get to the number 10? Was that intentional? Was it arbitrary? Here's how it came about. So when I talk to players, introduce myself to players, or interview players, and I use that in quotations because for the most part, all I'm really doing is asking for verifiable information, or just trying to confirm information that I already know, like class, their height, what AAU team they play for, things like that. But with the Jamboree Showcase, I thought it would be a really good opportunity to just ask each player I talk to individually who they think the best player in the Borderland area is. I tried to frame or ask the question in different ways to open up as many different possibilities or answers. And ultimately, after interviewing and I guess polling 40 players, 10 names came up. I ended up eliminating 6 answers because the prospects either did not give a really clear or definitive answer, or they named a player that was outside of this region, with the exception for one, and I'll eventually get to that player. So not to get too academic research nerdy on this episode, but just to use my master's degree here, I really feel like, although it's only 34 votes, I think that the data is generalizable. And what that really means is just that if you, let's say, had 340 votes, I think 34 votes or 340 votes, you would still roughly get the same 10 names. So that's really what it means, that your data is generalizable. It's a small percentage of a population of people that you're trying to vote to understand a certain sentiment or opinion or idea. But once you get to that certain number, that's an appropriate percentage of that population, you can safely use that number, generalize that data to a bigger population set. And I think, again, it's only 34, but if 10 times the amount of girls voted, you're still going to find these 10 players. So all that talk aside, let's pull up the poll. I'm going to show you the voting results, who finished first, and then down the line from there. And I think it's a pretty interesting mix of players. Okay, so here are the 10 players who received votes as the top player in the Borderland area. So number 1 was Jordan Sapien. This really comes as no surprise because I heard Sapien, amongst the people that I talked about, everybody mentioned her. If she's not the best player, she's in the discussion of that. She got 15 votes, far and away more than anybody else on this list. After her was Kylie Marquez from Americas. She received 5 votes. Again, not a surprise. Her name came up a lot in talking to other people. She's considered one of the elite prospects. After that, in third place is Emma Balsiger from Franklin. She received 3 votes. Not a surprise there. Emma's one of the top players in this region. And again, when I talk to people, her name always comes up. In a four-way tie for fourth, all these players receiving 2 votes were Allison De La O from Franklin, Teeya Gordon from Alamogordo, Abigail Ortega from Eastwood, and Jazlene Ruiz from Mayfield. De La O, incoming freshman, highly touted, a lot of buzz about her. Teeya Gordon, the best pure center the Borderland has to offer. Abigail Ortega, one of the most talented players this area has. Jazlene Ruiz, arguably the best player out of Las Cruces. And then after that, we had a 3-way tie for eighth. All of these players receiving 1 vote. Victoria Duran from Eastwood, Danae Gonzalez from Burgess, and Nakia Mojica from Hobbs. Duran, excellent player from Eastwood, does everything, well-rounded, complete prospect. Danae Gonzalez, gamer, tough as nails, well-conditioned, phenomenal player for Burgess. Nakia Mojica, again, a Hobbs player who, Hobbs is not part of the scope of my coverage. I do not include Hobbs in the Borderland, but I felt compelled to include her in this discussion, and I'll get to why when I bring her up individually. So these are the 10 that are getting discussed today, and I landed on 10 because the prospects that I talked to, they acknowledge these girls as the elite of the elite. So it's no shade against the girls in the honorable mentions. Those are awesome prospects too, some of the best players in the area. But this is the voice and the opinions of the top girls. These are the girls that they consider to be the top players in this area. So we're going to break them down one by one. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So let's get to it. So first we have Emma Balsiger from Franklin High School. She's a 2025 prospect, a 2 guard standing at 5'8". So notable qualities for Balsiger. Number 1, high level experience. She's a 4-year varsity player. So as a returning senior, she has just as much varsity experience or more than basically everybody in the Borderland region. But not only has she played 4 years of varsity basketball and played some of the best teams in this area, she has a lot of high-level experience at the AAU level playing for the West Texas Blazers. So the Blazers have some of the best talent in the area, but also they've played some pretty big national tournaments. So Balsiger, there's never going to be a time when she steps on the court this season and she's going to come across an opponent that A, she hasn't played before, or B, doesn't have the experience of playing somebody as good or equal to that prospect. And that's gonna be very, very important for Franklin this year because they have a lot of fresh, new incoming varsity talent that needs senior experience like Balsiger. After that, she's a high character kid. In parentheses, I put that she has a 4.52 GPA. I laugh because I just think about how low my GPA was in high school and in college as an undergrad, and I didn't know GPAs could go that high. Now, you might be asking, what does a GPA have to do with what you can do on a basketball court? And my response to that would be, it doesn't. There's not a causal relationship between your grade point average and your ability to shoot, pass, or rebound a basketball. But I think there's a correlative relationship in that if you're that disciplined as a student and high achieving as a student, I think that bleeds into other aspects of your life because when you accomplish things, when you work hard for things, when you're disciplined in areas, it makes being disciplined in other areas a lot more achievable and possible because you've already done it in other areas. So again, it's not causal, but I think there's a correlation between being a high-level student and the character that she has and how it informs her basketball game and her leadership qualities. But character and experience aside, this girl can absolutely play. And the headline, kind of title about Balsiger's game is that she is a prolific three-point shooter. Matter of fact, she's the most prolific three-point shooter the Borderline area has to offer, and on a national level too. Last season, she made 81 three-pointers, which was a school record on the girls' side. And if she played a complete season, I think she missed some games throughout the season, she probably would have flirted with nearly 100 three-pointers made, which is remarkable. As I go on throughout breaking down these top talents, you're going to hear me say things like, this prospect, checks all the boxes. They do everything, two-way effort. And one of the great things about girls basketball is that there are a lot of players who will play like that. Highly engaged, two-way effort, check all the boxes. But that's not necessarily unique. Balsiger is one of the most unique prospects this area has to offer because nobody's doing what she's doing. You're not going to see other prospects at times take 16 three-pointers in one game like she did a few times last season. So, like all shooters, will she have a 3 for 10 game and miss a few more than she probably would make on average? Sure. But she's going to come back the next game and she'll go 7 for 11 from the 3-point line and absolutely break a game wide open. That's how lethal she is as a perimeter shooter. But I think she's going to have an even better year with who Franklin has coming into the fold this year. And I'll get to that player next. But last thing with Balsiger, she's just a true leader. Really strong leadership qualities, very observant of everything that's going on the court, but also just really you can see she's a good communicator, positive reinforcement in how she talks to her teammates. And again, because of that experience and that character, you just don't become a leader by osmosis overnight or because you're a senior. It's having high level experience, playing in big, important games, playing against the best competition, but being a good person, having good character. And you can see that in terms of how she leads her teammates and in the conversations that I've had with other people about her. She's really smart, really mature for her age. And again, I think she's in a perfect position with who is coming onto this team and the new talent that's arriving for Franklin. So that's Emma Balsiger, one of the best players in the area, going to have a phenomenal senior year. Next up, we have Allison De La O, another Franklin prospect, but she's from the class of 2028, a 5'8" point guard. So I'm going to spend some time on De La O because I have some thoughts that I think are just connected to some bigger ideas that relate to her, but just I think are important to discuss. So the reason why I think Emma Balsiger is going to have an even bigger year is because she has this kid in the backcourt with her. So the most notable thing about De La O, she has a lot of buzz, a lot of hype behind her, high upside, high projection player because she has a D1 offer from UTEP as a freshman, has yet to play a varsity game of basketball and already has a D1 offer. That is remarkable and that stands out. To be clear, do I think she's the only D1 talent in the Borderline area? Absolutely not. I think a lot of these girls have the ability to play at the D1 level if given the exposure and opportunity. But it is unique because in the boys and girls side combined, there's only one D1 prospect on the boys side or only one player that's getting looked at a D1 level on the boys side, Jaden Leverett from Chapin. But there are no underclassmen, freshmen and sophomore either side who are already getting D1 offers. So that's really notable about De La O. And that creates a lot of buzz and a lot of noise. Why is that though? Why is she getting D1 offers and she hasn't even played a varsity game? It can seem absurd or out of this world in some ways. Number one, she's a refined on-ball talent. You watch this kid play, and yes, standing at 5'8", really good height for the position. She's going to get bigger. might end up around 5'9", 5'10", something like that. But when you watch her, it looks like you're watching a junior or a senior, somebody who's been in a varsity squad for at least a couple of years. That's how refined her game looks. It's so smooth, it's so calm, it's so poised, which is understandable for an advanced player at that age. You know, when you can have somebody at 14 years old running your offense, they better be poised, they better be calm, under control, and she absolutely is that. With that, she has a complete offensive game. Now, does that mean that she's uber efficient in all those areas, or she's incredibly proficient in all those areas? No, she's still learning, she's still growing. However, you watch her play and she checks off every box from an offensive perspective: ball handling, court awareness, IQ, playmaking, passing, shooting from the perimeter, shooting off the dribble, getting to the cup, finishing. She checks every box. She can do everything. And it's just a matter of refining those talents, becoming more efficient. And also keep in mind, I'm not mentioning defense here, but this is a two-way player. It's not like she only does work on offense and then takes plays off on defense. That's not true. But when you watch her play, being that she's a point guard, being that she has the ball in her hands, the offensive skill set just really takes center stage with this kid. Now, here's where I'm still talking about De La O, but I'm also going to zoom out because I think there's a bigger point to be made about players like De La O. So, oftentimes within our discussions or observations about really talented prospects, kids who seem advanced beyond their years, we tend to discuss them in ways that aren't really appropriate or true to who they are, in my opinion. And this isn't just for at the high school level. It can be, a one and done talent at the college level, or a rookie sensation at the professional level. Players who just kind of seem to be way ahead of the curve. And the way that we talk about them or identify them, we say things like, well, they're just so much more talented than everybody else, or it just comes easy to them, or they're just a natural talent, or they have, this divine intervention or ability given to them. And that's just simply not true because, well, for one, it kind of dehumanizes them and makes them into something that they're not. But also at the same time, it really doesn't give them the actual credit when we say things like they have natural talent or it comes easy to them, when in reality, the reason why a player like De La O is getting a D1 offer, or because she has a refined on-ball talent or a complete offensive game, there are other things at work. So when talking to people that really know De La O, teammates, trainers, people that see her work every day, people that know her way better than I do. When I ask them, how is she so good? I don't how can a 14-year-old have this much poise and be this complete and already getting D1 offers when other really talented girls aren't? I don't make it make sense for me. Here's what they don't say. They don't say, well, she's just a natural talent. Well, the game just comes easy to her. Well, there's divine intervention helping her out. They don't say those things. What they say is, this girl is undeniably a hard worker, one of the hardest workers in the sport of basketball right now. Boys or girls, she's a gym rat. If she could sleep on the gym floor, she would. She goes home and she's watching the game. When she's talking with coaches or trainers, she's asking questions. She's constantly trying to get better. One of her biggest preoccupations is basketball. And I really think it's important to understand that part, the work ethic, because there's a problem that I think kids have, young adults have, and I even had this problem because back in the day, I was a decently talented high school tennis player. I played junior tennis for 10 years, And when you walk onto the court and you see other players, you invariably compare yourself, and you look at them from a distance, and you see players that are better than you and more talented than you, and you can tend to believe that, well, I'm not their height, or I'm not as strong as them, I'm not as talented as them, it just comes easy to them, they're natural athletes. And that comparison will rob you of your true potential, because when we look at and frame players like De La O as naturally talented or just more gifted than others, it's just not true. It's about the work you're willing to put in and your mental makeup. How confident are you in yourself? How much do you believe in yourself? How hard do you want to work for something? And so when peers around the girls basketball community look at De La O, don't look at her and think that you can't be just like her. You can't get, D1 offers. You're not as talented as her. It's just a matter of, are you willing to work as hard as a kid like De La O? Do you have the work ethic? Do you have the confidence in yourself to get better? And hopefully, players like De La O actually inspire more so than take away by comparison, if that makes sense. Um, because again, we need to talk about these prospects appropriately, not for their natural talent or their gifts. It's about work ethic at the end of the day. That is it at its core. So, that's my little rant on De La O, but I hope that what she's doing and the noise and buzz and attention she's getting, people realize why she's getting it. And hopefully that inspires other really talented prospects to continue to put in the work. So yeah, Allison De La O, man, Franklin is lucky because they got 4 more years of really, really good guard play. Next player is Victoria Duran from Eastwood, a 2026 guard standing at 5'8". Man, Duran is really hard to evaluate as a prospect, mainly because you watch her play and it's hard to distinguish what she's actually good at in specific, like where are her big strong suits. And that's really because she just does everything. She checks every box. So you can't really just point out what's the one big thing that she does really well. Well, she kind of does everything really well. For starters, she's really fluid on and off the ball. She can play the one or the two pretty interchangeably. A lot of girls on Eastwood, you can say that about. And that's very true for Duran herself, which is why I just kind of have her categorized as a guard. Not really sure what she is per se. I think this season she's really primed for a big breakout season. And I say that saying she was top 3 last season for Eastwood in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. So again, a completely well-rounded player. She's completely engaged on both ends. There's no possessions off with this kid. There's no hands on the knees. There's no, sub me out. I need a 2-minute breather. This kid is fully engaged, two-way effort, high motor, like a lot of Eastwood players are. And like I already said, she just does everything. So with that, she has 2 more seasons ahead of her, and it's just about maximizing that efficiency, becoming more proficient at those specific skill sets. But again, I think this player is just really, really talented and somebody who can play at the highest level. It's really just about work ethic and mentality. Believing in herself, having the confidence to think that she can play at the highest level, and then hopefully she gets enough exposure and just that opportunity because this kid has it all. She checks every single box. So Victoria Duran is one of the best players in the Borderland without a doubt. One of the more impressive prospects I saw at the Jamboree, and I can't wait to see more of her this season. Next up, we have Danae Gonzalez from Burgess, a 2025 point guard standing at 5'3". Talked to a lot of people about Danae Gonzalez, and they all mentioned that this kid is just a gamer, a dog, all effort. And watching her play in person, that was true. Somebody who, again, does not take any possessions off, and is probably the best conditioned prospect that I've seen. across boys and girls basketball. Watching her go up and down the court, it's just like this all game long, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and she just does not seem to get tired. It's kind of like watching somebody at the gym on the treadmill, just kind of running in a flow state. I briefly talked to her at the Jamboree Showcase on the boys' side. She was helping out with that one, and I asked her about that. And she does a lot of cross training, conditioning, putting in actual miles. So she has some level of conditioning to be a cross country athlete if she wanted to, or a track athlete if she wanted to. She does a lot of road work, which is not surprising, just considering how she goes about playing the game. But deeper in that, she's a really aggressive attacking player, and on both ends. So whether that means she's the lead point of attack defender, guarding the ball 94 feet, or if she's going out and getting rebounds too, which she's really good at for her size, or on offense, when she has the ball in her hands, she's attacking, she's getting downhill, she's she's putting pressure on the rim, not settling for long jump shots. She's going to attack you on both sides of the floor, and with that, she impacts every area of the game. I'm just going to read her junior year stat line. She averaged 9.9 points per game, 6.4 rebounds per game, 4.6 assists per game, 3.6 steals per game, and 0.3 blocks per game. So 6.5 rebounds at 5'3". Don't get it twisted. This is one of the best rebounding guards the area has to offer, because she is not afraid to get down in the paint and put her body on the line to go after balls. She's really, really impressive, and her, along with Alyssa Morales, is going to make for one of the best backcourts in the Borderland area without a doubt. And I just can't wait to see more of her play. I love the way that she kind of grinds out there, effort filled, always engaged. Those are the type of players that you really appreciate watching over and over and over again. So shout out to Danae Gonzalez. I think she's going to have an excellent senior year. Next up, we have Teeya Gordon from Alamogordo. She's a 2025 prospect, a center at 6'2". So Teeya Gordon is a pure center in girls high school basketball. Standing at 6'2", one of the bigger prospects that we have. Don't have a lot of girls at that height. So with that, she's an automatic low post mismatch. Basically anytime she steps out onto the court, you do not find other centers in this area who can match her height or frame. And with that, she plays to her strengths, which is really nice to see for a player of her size. Deep low post touches. You're not going to push her off the block. You're not going to see this kid out on the perimeter dribbling, trying to shoot, 3-pointers. She's going to play close, deep into the paint where she's most effective. And with that, she's a really reliable double-double. Last season, she averaged 12 points and 9 rebounds for Alamogordo, and there's no indication or no reason why those numbers are going to go down. If anything, they're going to go up for her senior year. What I like most about Gordon, though, is that she seems to be pretty self-aware, and I want to be cautious in how I approach, because I do not know this kid. I had a very brief interaction with her. I've been following her from afar for about a year or so, because I heard about her before, watched some tape on her. I'm not going to pretend that I know her, but briefly talked to her at the Jamboree Showcase. When I talk to players, again, I'd try to just get the verifiable information or confirm information, height, school, class, all that stuff. But I'll tend to ask, what do you think your best skill is? Or what's the biggest thing that you're trying to improve on? And from time to time, prospects will give answers from my perspective that don't really line up with how I view them. For instance, they'll say that their biggest strength is something that I look at and think, I don't know, I think you can improve on that, or vice versa. And it's not to say that they're wrong. Their perspective is their perspective on how they see their game. But when a prospect gives you an answer that lines up with how you see them, it does make you think, okay, This kid is self-aware and kind of seeing the areas where they're best at and where they need to improve at, and or they have people in their orbit who are being honest with the things that they need to work on. So when I asked Teeya Gordon, what's the biggest thing that you're trying to improve on this season, she said her conditioning. And I would agree. Watching Gordon, that was my biggest takeaway. If the conditioning can improve, she's going to be even better. However, the more I watched her at the showcase, the more I was actually impressed with her conditioning. And here's why. Because she's such a big low post mismatch, she is always the point of emphasis for Alamogordo going down the floor. And how could she not? Especially with the type of positioning in the paint that she gets. Every time down the floor, these deep paint touches that automatically put so much pressure on a defense to collapse in and double and things like that. So I'm watching her play in just about every offensive possession. Even if she doesn't get the ball, she's constantly a point of emphasis. Moreover, she sees just about every type of defensive scheme. Obviously, in man-to-man situations, she gets doubled. Teams run a 2-3 zone. So, for instance, Alamogordo played Americas, and Americas implemented a 2-3 zone, which is always a great kind of response to a team that has a player who's really formidable in the low post. The 2-3 is so good, really effective to keep the ball out on the perimeter outside of the paint. But even then, she's getting doubled or she's getting fronted over the post. The best way to attack the 2-3 is to flash to the middle, flash to the nail, that kind of sweet spot, that opening right in the middle. So again, even when teams were zoning up against Alamogordo, she was still flashing hard to the middle, being a point of emphasis, getting her hands up, trying to enact some offense. So, yeah, can your conditioning improve? Yes, but also at the same time, it's really, really impressive when you consider how hard she works and how often they go to her. And being a post player like that, I mean, that's the most physical area on the court. With people doubling you, trying to push you off your spots, stuff like that. So that again and again and again over time, and being the best rebounder or the most important rebounder on the team. So she's going at it both ways. So I was just really impressed with Teeya Gordon. I think she has the right mentality with her style of play, playing to her strengths. And I think she's going to have a phenomenal senior year for Alamogordo, and is undoubtedly the best pure center that this area has to offer. Next up is Kylie Marquez from Americas. She's a 2026 prospect. I have her listed as a combo guard standing at 5'8". Now, the most impressive prospect that I saw at the Girls Jamboree Showcase was Kylie Marquez. I mean, there were a lot of great players, but Marquez really stood out to me, which is not a surprise because she is an elite prospect, elite for her position, class, and overall rank. And that's what I was told about her too, going into the Jamboree, but just conversations that I had all throughout the summer. Why is she elite? She checks every box. She does everything. You cannot name a thing that she can't do or will not do within a game. Just a absolutely complete player, and at 5'8", really tall for the position, at least for this area, and just a really solid athlete too. But watching Marquez play, there were really two key areas, two key components to her game on both sides of the ball that really, really stood out to me. On the offensive end, it was the playmaking. She had some of the best assists of that 2-day weekend at the Jamboree, just looking ahead, eyes up, go ahead passes to teammates out in transition, just really smart, quick, fast processing. She's known to have one of the best IQs within all of girls basketball. That absolutely showed. And with the teammates that she has around her, Mary Brooks, Jaden Herrera, Kaylin Madrano, they all know how to play with each other so well because they've played with each other for so long. And Marquez is such a great leader and connector to put all that together for them. But again, she can do it on ball, off ball. She checks every box. And then the last point is the defensive versatility, which was not a surprise because, to my knowledge, I believe she was named the 6A Defensive Player of the Year by the El Paso Times for the 2023-24 season. And that showed she can literally guard every position. So going back to Teeya Gordon from Alamogordo, the best pure center the Borderland has to offer, a low post mismatch, when Americas went to their 2-3 zone, guess who was guarding her? Or even when they weren't in their zone? Marquez, fronting her in the post. And if she wasn't the one fronting, she was that player on the weak side shading over who would be the help if Gordon got the ball. But she can guard guards, wings, everybody. Great man-to-man defender. Great in a zonal system, playing out in space, reading that next pass. I mean, it's all there. So again, when I say there's more than one D1 talent in girls basketball right now, this is another player I'm talking about. This kid has D1 potential, and it's just about continuing to build that confidence, putting in the work, and then hopefully she gets the exposure and opportunity. But I mean, I can't say enough about Marquez. I think she's an exceptional talent. And again, she has 2 more years to get even more efficient, to get even more proficient. Um, and to do it on that America's team with 3 other guards who have 2 more years, I think America's is just going to have a really special run over these next 2 years, now playing down at the 2-5A level as well. So Kylie Marquez, one of the elite prospects, if not the best prospect in the Borderland area. She's going to have a big, big junior year. Next up, we have Nakia Mojica from Hobbs. She's a 2025 prospect. I have her listed as a guard at 5'7". So Mojica is an elite prospect from a different area, the number 17 overall prospect in the state of New Mexico, according to Prep Girls Hoops. I write for Prep Girls Hoops, but I am not involved in the rankings, so don't at me with any of that stuff. I have zero involvement with any of that. What I will say about Mojica is that for all the players that I know in southern New Mexico, Las Cruces, Alamogordo, Chaparral, Santa Teresa, all those players, I would say she's the best. And if she's not the best, she's on a short list of 3. But I would say she's the best if we're including her with southern New Mexico prospects. I can't speak to the prospects out in Albuquerque or northern New Mexico. That's not my area. But of the players that I know in southern New Mexico, she's one of them. And if she was a Borderland prospect, she would be one of the top 5, top 10, something like that, for sure. So why is that? Number one, high IQ. Kid is super smart. Great court awareness, just aware of everything around her. You know, she has those true kind of point guard attributes that you would want. And just really, really dynamic and good with the ball and good with the ball in her hands. Next, she has exceptional feet, really, really good footwork, good lateral quickness, change of direction, just really smooth around the court, glides around the court at 5'7", really good height for the position. And then the next thing, she's a knockdown shooter. I mean, if you're continuously leaving this kid open, you're playing bad defense. You have to rotate to her. You can't close out late. Whether it's in the standstill, catch and shoot, off the dribble, pull up middies, she has all of that, which is why I have her categorized as a guard and not necessarily a point guard. Can she play at the point guard position? And she does, absolutely, and she does it phenomenally. But she has the skill set and the ability to play off ball as well. So Mojica is an excellent talent. I don't really know how much coverage I'm going to give to her going forward because she plays for Hobbs. I don't know if I'll include her in my 2025 Borderland rankings. Again, it's in a way not fair to her and fair to other prospects because I'm not going to be covering Hobbs. I'm not going to be making my way out there. I already have enough coverage responsibilities for this basketball season. I believe Hobbs is going down to Alamogordo in December, so I might see her play one more time. But I included her on this list for two reasons. Number one, she's an exceptionally talented kid, and she deserves as much coverage as she can get. So anytime I have an excuse to talk about her, I'm going to. But also, she's kind of a unofficial Borderland prospect because she's played against Borderland area prospects so much throughout her high school career, or played with them out in the AAU circuit, and the prospects here know her. Hence, why she got a vote amongst her Borderland peers. So, don't know how much I'm going to cover her going forward, but Mojica is an excellent talent, an excellent player for Hobbs, and she's going to have a great senior year. Next, we have Abigail Ortega from Eastwood, another 2026 guard standing at 5'5". So again, just part of that phenomenal Eastwood team. I would say Eastwood has three really, really major prospects who are the best player on the team for different reasons, if that makes sense. And I'll explain. Itzel Caro is the undeniable vocal, emotional leader of that team. When she speaks, everybody listens. She gets the team organized, checks every box, can do just about everything on the court. Great connector, Swiss Army knife type of player, but like a true vocal and emotional leader in the way that she conducts herself on and off the court. Victoria Duran, I would probably say, is the best player right now at Eastwood, just in terms of how she impacts the game in all the various areas. She's just probably the most well-rounded and the most proficient player that they have. Then there's Abigail Ortega, and I think Ortega is the most talented player that Eastwood has to offer. So I heard a lot about her going into the Jamboree and just this season in general, and how talented of a player she is. And so when I showed up to the Jamboree bright and early around, 8 o'clock in the morning, I can't remember if Eastwood was the first team on or not, maybe the second game. And I was really excited to see Eastwood in person. And I knew who Ortega was just by watching her warm up. Never seen her play before, didn't know what she looked like, didn't know her number, any of that. But watching Eastwood warm up, I knew, oh wow, look at that jump shot. That is one of the best looking jump shots I've seen for a prospect in this area. I guess that's Ortega. That's the player that I've been told about. Excellent shooter. One of the best jumpers from a mechanics perspective the game has to offer. And again, I'm not a shot doctor or anything like that, nor am I going to pretend to be. But basketball is a very simple sport in that, especially at the lower levels, when you see a player who is like very mechanically sound, you know it when you see it. And this kid has a beautiful jump shot, but she's a very proficient shooter. She shot 55% on 2-point field goals last season at the guard position. And a lot of that has to do with she's just a great system fit for what Eastwood's trying to do. She's really, really good at just kind of playing off ball, floating around the perimeter, getting to her spots, and getting to spots that she will eventually get the ball. And with that, she just gets quality attempts. I like to think of Eastwood plays a very egalitarian brand of basketball, meaning that it's not really solely focused on one player. We have to make sure that we get this player the ball every time down the court. They're more about generating quality shot attempts. And it could be Ortega, it could be Caro, it could be Duran, it could be Morales. It could be so many different players. But part of her proficiency is because she fits into that system so well, and she gets such quality attempts. But in addition to that, for all that she can do off ball as a two guard, good height at 5'5", 5'6", she can play on the ball too. She has on ball skills. So it's not to say that, this isn't a player that can play at the point guard position. She absolutely can. I think a lot of those girls can. And they kind of all do, because they do everything. Every player on Eastwood, they just do everything. Just like America's, when this team has it going, it's seamless interchangeability with players at different positions that seemingly have so many of the same skill sets, and Ortega fits into that. But one of the most talented players that this area has to offer. So again, it's just about continuing to build the confidence, getting more reps, putting the work in, and she puts the work in. She's a hard working kid who I think has a lot of potential and can play at the highest level of college basketball on the girls' side, just like so many of these girls can. It's just a matter of putting the work in, confidence increasing, and getting that exposure. So that's Abigail Ortega. Next up, we have Jazlene Ruiz from Mayfield, a 2025 guard standing at 5'7". So Ruiz was not in attendance at the Jamboree, but I've been keeping tabs on her for about a year or so. She's an elite Las Cruces prospect. I would say for the city alone, she's probably the best player out of Las Cruces. And then in southern New Mexico, if we're including Nakia Mojica from Hobbs, Teeya Gordon from Alamogordo, those types of players, she's in that discussion. She's currently the number 29 overall prospect in the state of New Mexico for prep girls hoops. So top player on the top program. Mayfield, I think, is going to have a phenomenal year because players like Ruiz are returning, but other top talent returning there too. But aside from the ranking and the team, in terms of on court, fluid finisher, one of the smoothest finishers that the Borderland has to offer. You can tell that's a really comfortable part of the game for her. Nice, easy touch, doesn't panic, calm in traffic. And again, the finishing can seem like, well, she just has a natural talent. She's naturally gifted, but again, those things don't really exist. It's about the work that's put in, and you can see within her finishing ability that she's put in some work there. Also, in addition to that, she impacts out in transition. I believe last season she averaged 4 steals per game. So when you go and watch tape on her, there are a lot of plays where, on ball, point of attack, getting the steal, layup line on the other end, layup line on the other end. But on the offensive end, in the half court, really good at attacking downhill, putting pressure on the rim, doesn't settle for long jump shots. But she's just a really, really dynamic transition player who does a lot of her damage, a lot of her work in those areas because she's so good at getting to the rim, so good at finishing. I'm really excited to get to see her play this season for Mayfield. I think Mayfield is going to have a really, really strong season, a really strong chance to win district. They'll probably be the preseason front runners, if you will. But also, I think they're one of the better programs just for the Borderline area because they got prospects like Ruiz. Okay, folks, so last player on the list, Jordan Sapien from Pebble Hills, 2025 prospect, a point guard, standing at 5'1". So as you already know, she received the most votes amongst her peers, and let's kind of break down why. But in addition to that, like I said, when I talk to a lot of different people about give me just throw out names, throw out, first name off the top of your head, who you think is the best player or top 5 players, everybody mentioned Jordan Sapien. And basically everybody mentioned her first or thought of her. If they had to pick, it's probably Jordan Sapien. So why is that? First and foremost, it's her IQ. And I've already talked about on this list, there are a lot of high IQ players in girls high school basketball. Kylie Marquez, Allison De La O, Emma Balsiger. There's a lot to go off of that play and just look at the game, see the game a lot better than other players. But when people talk about Jordan Sapien, there's high IQ players, and then there's Jordan Sapien kind of going off the screen, really. She just has this ability to process the game at a much faster rate than other players around her. So the faster you process the game, the slower it becomes. The slower you process the game, the faster the game becomes. The game does not speed up for this girl unless she wants to speed up. The ball's on a string. You watch her play, and it's like the ball is like connected to her. It doesn't leave her, which being at 5'1", a smaller statured kid makes sense because, when you're that height all your life and you're playing basketball from a young age, What position are they going to put you at? Point guard. Who has the ball in their hands all the time? Point guards. So she's grown up playing with the ball in her hands, and it shows. One of the more reliable ball handlers that the area has to offer. Reminds me of Austin Bonilla on the boys' side for Canateo, around 5'1", 5'2". And again, with him, ball on a string, low center of gravity, hard to take the ball off of. That's what Sapien's like. With that high IQ, ball on the string, she goes everywhere on the court. There's not a area of the court that she does not touch on ball or off ball. And so with that, she's like the ultimate stat stuffer. I'm going to read you her stat line from her junior year, which is absurd, honestly, what she did. Her numbers over the past 2 seasons have been absurd, but this is just what she did as a junior. 17.7 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, 7.8 assists per game, 4.3 steals per game, and she shot 86% from the free throw line. So, for starters, this girl could be a 20-point scorer if she wanted to, which is probably the most underrated part of her game. Like, she can score with the best of them. It's undeniable. It's proven statistically, and she does it at a fairly efficient rate. Nearly 5 rebounds per game at 5'1". Crazy. 7.8 assists per game. I think people really need to slow down and understand how hard it is to average 8 assists per game at the high school level. Even with how unreliable high school stats can be or how inflated they can be at times, it's hard to inflate assist numbers to 8 a game. Again, that speaks to IQ, processing skills, 2 steps ahead of the defense. She's playing chess, everybody else is playing checkers. And when you can navigate and get to every spot on the floor, you're opening up scoring opportunities at every spot on the floor for Pebble Hills. So remarkable playmaker and facilitator, while also nearly being a 20-point scorer. And then the 4.3 steals per game. The low-hanging fruit with this kid, well, she's 5'1". She can't do much defensively. She can't do what a Kylie Marquez can do. And yeah, you're probably right, but she can make up for it as a on-ball defender, averaging nearly 4.5 steals per game. So she puts in the work defensively too. And then lastly, just the 86% from the free throw line, and she on decent volume too. It's not like she shot 86% on like 40 free throw attempts. It was decent volume. She knows how to get to the line. She knows how to bait bigger defenders to leaving their feet, which is really impressive too. And again, just another IQ thing. But you really have to understand how hard it is to shoot 86% at any level. Like when you're shooting north of 85% from the free throw line, that is a strong indicator of a really good shooter. There are really good shooters within the Borderland area who don't sniff anything close to 86%. So just another remarkable aspect of her game. And all of those things, that's why she's the consensus top prospect. That's why her peers voted her far and away the best amongst everybody else. That's why she got 15 votes, from some of the best players in the area. And that's what her peers think of her. But again, the people in the know, the people who've been watching her play for a long time, they think that too. So are these my rankings? Is she going to be my top prospect when I put out my 2025 Borderland rankings? I don't know. But for now, she deserves that title as the top prospect because her peers and intelligent people within the basketball community alike have recognized her as such. So that's Jordan Sapien from Pebble Hills. Okay, folks, man, if you've made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much. I know it was another long one, but I've recorded this episode and re-recorded this episode so many times, trying to be as succinct as possible, as concise as possible. But as you can see, there's so much talent in this area, and I just feel like so much needs to be said about these girls. One last point, and then we're done for the day. I really just want to stress how impressed I was with the girls basketball scene over the course of the weekend at the Jamboree Showcase, but just within the conversations that I had with coaches, players, people within the AAU community around this area, I really think something special is going on in girls high school basketball right now. And I want to be very clear and careful with my words and what I'm about to say next, because I am not comparing or pitting the girls basketball scene against the boys basketball scene here. So I want to be very clear about that. But I really think that it would serve some of the boys within the basketball community, or just the basketball community in general, to pay more attention to what's happening within girls basketball in this area. It's just different. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's more talented. Again, not trying to compare or contrast necessarily in that sense, but it is different. It's a different vibe. It's a different energy. And I think if we observe it, if we study it and try to learn something from it, the boys scene and the basketball scene in general in this area will only improve off of it, because undeniably there is just an incredible amount of high character kids playing basketball in this area. High character kids, two-way effort and engagement, squeezing every bit of talent that they have out of their body. And there's just such an obvious groundedness and gratitude within the way that they play and the opportunities that they have to play. Because at the end of the day, this is a team sport. It's about that, how good can you be within the context of playing with four other people on the court against five other people on the other side. That's what it's really all about. And I just think that so many of the prospects on the girls' side really just represent what it means to be a great individual athlete in a team sport. And it's something that deserves more attention. It's something that should be observed, studied, and have something taken from it. So, as a whole basketball community, I think we need to start paying a little bit more attention to it, because, again, not better, not worse. It's just different from the boys scene, and I think something can be taken from that and applied to the boys side as well. So that's my spiel. That's my last rant for the day. If you made it again this far, thank you so much. I know it's another long episode. The links to my Substack and my Twitter are in the description for this podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, share. The bigger the sketch, the more support, the more I can do with it. And I genuinely appreciate the support and the feedback that I've gotten for this so far. It really means a lot to me. So thank you so much. And without further ado, thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.